Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast. So, this weekend we had quite a lot. A lot was going on all weekend. It was the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indy 500, and then for those who care about basketball, it was game 3 of the Knicks versus the Pacers. So, it was a big day for us yesterday.
Yeah, we watched hours of athletics. I think it was probably one of the biggest days we've had of watching sports. So, definitely a big day for us.
Well, we were planning on filming this Monaco Grand Prix recap episode immediately after the race, and then for some reason our TV was showing that the Indy 500 didn't start until 4 p.m. I saw somebody else online make this mistake too.
Well, I think the problem is that I got confused because we have Hulu Live right now, and I grew up on cable, and when big events were happening, they were on the big channels, or there's so many freaking sports channels now that you don't know, and so most of IndyCar was on FS1, and I think FS1 was playing it later, they were playing it over again for I guess people that couldn't watch it. And so that's what I got. So I was like, oh, it's from 4:30 to 7:30. I'm like, wow, that's crazy that it would overrun into the Pacers game. But then all of a sudden you were on TikTok.
I was on TikTok, and IndyCar's TikTok was posting videos throughout the morning, and they posted the one where it was drivers to your cars, and I was like, it's 12.
Yeah.
What do you mean drivers to your car?
It was surprising, but so yeah, we had to delay it, but it's fine.
Yeah, but we ended up getting to watch the entire Indy 500. Honestly, I can't even imagine the F1 drivers going from doing the Monaco Grand Prix, and then a bunch of them were like, my plan tonight is to go home, sit on my couch, and watch the Indy 500. It starts in about an hour, so I need to get home in that time. And then they all went out afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say is that talk about an absolute shit show.
In what manner?
For the IndyCar.
Oh, yeah.
For it was just so crazy, but yeah.
It was a little bit of everything happened.
Yeah, we got everything at one point.
We got a fire, we got, unfortunately, somebody crashing into their crew in the pit lane. We got lots of crashes. It was kind of crazy.
It was
Palou was not very happy about the ending, though.
Yeah, it was very exciting for our first Indy 500.
Yeah, our first full one. Last year I saw bits and pieces of it throughout the day.
I remember you catching the very end, too.
Yeah, but at that point, we honestly did not watch a lot of IndyCar, and we didn't really know anything about the drivers very much. All we knew was Arrow McLaren.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. And I knew who Alex Palou was because he was the Max Verstappen of IndyCar. And we had done our IndyCar episodes at that point where we were learning a bit more about IndyCar, but we hadn't really sat down and gotten into IndyCar. And even when we went to the IndyCar race here in Nashville last year, we still weren't huge IndyCar fans. I think it was more just a really good experience for us to honestly get us really interested in it.
Yeah.
And now we definitely follow the sport a lot closer than we have in the past. So we knew who everybody was who raced yesterday.
Yeah, I think it was also just more exciting to follow it and to know the people in the cars and where they are. And when we went to the race last year in person, I think we were kind of at a loss for who we should cheer for. We were just there for the experience.
Yeah.
I think. Whereas this year, I think we're definitely gonna go with we know who we want to win. We understand the sport, especially ovals, a little bit better because I think that's something we struggled with. Was our first in-person race. Shocker. I think they both have their pros and cons. A street track or a track that you see in F1 versus an oval. But I think I was overwhelmed by them. I think I didn't fully understand. Whereas watching the Indy 500, I think you get a clearer picture of the strategy, the amount of pit stops they have to do, the fact that fueling is still a thing. It's just so different.
I actually think that this might be a hot take, but I think going in person to see races is not my preferred way to see the sport. I think for F1, you see, and for street tracks for IndyCar, you see 10 seconds of the race course every single time that they come around. Not even 10 seconds, that's really pushing it. And so and the rest of the race you're watching on a screen. You might not like be able to hear the commentators whatsoever because of how loud the cars are. And so you have to wear your headphones if you have any, and you're listening to the commentators there, but also everybody in that area is also trying to listen to the commentators on their phone. So, like, service might not be that great because it might be a little overwhelmed. And I think it's more for the experience of seeing it in person. But, like, if you really want to watch something, don't do it in person.
Well, and that's what I think, like, a few of the guys that were sitting around us said about Nashville was Nashville used to be in the streets of Nashville, but because they're rebuilding the football stadium, it is now at the Speedway.
I did not realize that was
And
why they moved to the Speedway. I thought it was just they didn't want to go down Broadway.
no, the football stadium was the pit. That's
No,
where
I
they used
knew
to
that. I
pit.
just didn't put two and two together.
Yeah. So they moved it to the Speedway, but the gentlemen that were sitting around us were kind of talking about how they were happy it was at the Speedway as opposed to on the street because they were like, you get a few seconds, you don't know where anyone is, you have to have your phone out. Like, it just seemed like a bigger inconvenience.
Yeah.
But then again, I do think that there's something beautiful about being able to experience certain races in person. It's an opportunity that we wouldn't poo-poo at.
No, obviously we would love to go see races in person. It's more like there are certain races like Monaco, I oddly think, that I would be okay seeing in person, not because it's Monaco, but because race day, you know what's going to happen. So, like, if you miss a little bit, like, it's okay because it's okay if you see only 2 seconds of the track because you already know it's just going to be a DRS train the whole race. Where if it's something like, I don't know, I, I can't even think of a track, but like so many other tracks where there's so much passing going on,
Mhm.
you might not know what's going on.
Yeah. I don't know, but
Anyways, so we are going to do mostly a focus on F1 today, and then probably at the end of at the end of our normal segments, in our final thoughts, we'll talk a little bit more about IndyCar, just because we did watch the entire 4 hours of that race, so there is a lot to unpack there. Yeah, let's get into it. MC.
Alrighty, so the official race name for this weekend was the Formula One Tag Heuer Grand Prix de Monaco 2025. The track name is the Circuit de Monaco, and for those that aren't aware, this is a street track. I have my issues with it, but it is very, very tight streets in a very old city, and the cars have gotten quite big, so
The cars are double the size now than they used to be
yeah.
when the Monaco Grand Prix first got started.
So the first Grand Prix here was held in the inception year in 1950 of F1, and I think it's the only race or the longest running race.
Technically, yeah, there were Monaco Grand Prix before the inception of F1, but it is the longest running race, I do believe.
Yeah. So the circuit length is 3.37 kilometers or 2.07 miles. So it is on the shorter side for what we normally see, which is why they have to do 78 laps around this circuit, which is crazy. The race distance in total comes out to 260.286 kilometers or 161.734 miles. The lap record, which is still in place, was done in 2021 in a Mercedes by Lewis Hamilton. He did it in a minute and 12.909 seconds. This year, the lap record during the race was set by Lando in his McLaren, and he did it in a minute and 13.221 seconds. So a little bit slower, close, but not too close.
I do think that his qualifying time was the
I
fastest
do have
ever.
a note about that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the number of turns on this racetrack is 19, and then there's only one DRS detection zone, which isn't really a big surprise because of how short of a track it is. The DRS detection zone is right at turn 17, and activation begins after turn 19 in the start-finish straight. So that is the Monaco Grand Prix track info.
Awesome. We are going to get into practice now. Practice.
So, Charles had a lockup pretty early on in practice 1, but was able to avoid damage. But then he ran into Lance Stroll. I don't believe Lance saw Charles, and they ended up giving Lance, I think, like
one place grid penalty.
Yeah. It was honestly just really weird.
So it was around the famous chicane. Not chicane, hairpin turn.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my opinions about how Charles and how people treat Charles around Monaco. I think everybody has their home races, and so like you really want to win your home race, and like people are extra stressed but also excited at their home races. But I sometimes think that Charles, especially this year, was like acting like it's him or no one, or like get out of my way. This is my home. I need to win. Which I understand the want to win. But why are you trying to pass someone around the outside of the hairpin turn? I understand his practice, but like he clearly yielded for another car and then thought that he could go around because I don't think he saw Charles until the last second. I think his engineer told him as Charles crashed into him.
Well, and I think that's the problem that I faced was it's practice. Like, calm down.
Literally.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that there's a weird pressure that is put on a lot of the drivers, some more than others. I mean, we saw, unfortunately, Kimi Antonelli kind of suffer from not a great performance in Imola, which is his home race.
I almost think the added pressure of your home race makes you not perform very well. Like, I think you're really lucky if you get to win your home race. But, like, the added pressure of it is going to make you, it honestly could make your performance worse.
Yeah, I don't know what the headspace is like. I'm not a driver, but yeah, it just seems to never like flow well for anyone. And I mean, luckily for Charles, he did have an exceptional experience last year.
I think his
winning
goal
it.
was to replicate that. I think he's frustrated with the car this year.
Yeah, I think he was hoping that like some miracle would happen that the team kind of needs. But unfortunately, they did get close, but yeah. So Stroll would end up being out for the rest of practice 1 because his rear suspension was broken and they did a gearbox change.
His car was far more damaged than anybody like commented on.
Yeah, I think Charles just had front wing damage. They just had to replace
And that's why I was a little pissed off because Charles was acting like Lance purposely did this. Meanwhile, Lance is now out for the rest of practice because his car is far more damaged than you're acting like.
Well, Charles ended up topping that session with Max behind him and Lando. So practice 2, Isaac hit the barrier and ripped his rear tire off, and to be honest, a lot of people were kissing the walls. This is pretty typical. I feel like every year that we've watched Monaco, it's just been the same old, same old.
Well, and there's a couple of the barriers around Monaco that are not a full-on metal barrier, so like you have some wiggle room where if you kind of touch them a little bit with the edge of your tire, like they are a little bit more flexible. And so that is the good part about some of these corners. But it's the one corner around the swimming pool area, I believe, where you're coming out of the tunnel and then you have that quick, like almost chicane, and you make the quick little left and then basically you want to hug the corner when you're making that left. Everybody with their rear tire, there were several people. Kimmy did it, Isaac did it. Their left tire on the rear left tire hugged that a little bit too close, hit that, then it kind of spun them a little bit, and then they hit the barrier on the exit.
Yeah. Oscar was able to put in a good time, but then hit the barrier as well, raising the red flags.
And that was at like turn 1, I believe. He just like couldn't rotate the car.
Yeah, I mean it's a tight course. It's very slow.
If you have one minor lockup, there's a chance you could crash your whole car.
You also, watching them drive through it, it is stressful. It's just, it doesn't seem comfortable. Not that many of the races do, but this one seems especially. So the top 3 times for that session was Charles, Oscar, and Lewis. Not a lot of people went out early during practice session 3. I don't think a lot of people were happy with the track conditions with very low grip. A lot of them were struggling with that. At the end of the session, Lewis had put in a good time, but it looked like he hit the barrier coming to a stop. The top 3 times, very similar, was Charles, Max, and Lando. Now, Charles did a clean sweep of practice.
Yeah.
So, people went into qualifying very, very much assuming that, like, oh, like, this is it. Like, we're on the road. We're on the road to glory.
Well, and just a note as a reminder, the rules changed a little bit this year. So in the race, normally you're just required to do a 1 pit stop where you have to just change to a different tire compound. But because of last year's race, after the big crash at the beginning, it was kind of just a procession, the whole race. The FIA added a rule so that you, in hopes that maybe would add a little spice to it. So the requirement was that you had to stop 2 times for pit stops, and they were hoping that was going to mix things up a little bit. Kind of backfired on them because they don't have rules against certain things that drivers were doing in the race. And so I would not be surprised if this upcoming summer, or this upcoming off season, if they want to keep the 2 stop rule, they're going to have to make a rule about something else that we'll talk about. It was interesting.
I think some teams took advantage of it, some teams struggled, and some teams handled it the way I think that if I expected it to be handled. It was a mixed bag of responses to something. I'm curious to see how the teams will handle it next year and the way the FIA is going to tweak it.
There's a lot of people who don't particularly love the Monaco race just because it has the reputation to be boring on an actual race day. And it's really interesting to hear from the commentators after the race, like Ruth Buscum was saying how she really likes it because you have a variation of races on the calendar. You have races where it really is dependent on the driver's skill. And so, like, qualifying in Monaco really is dependent on the driver's skill. You're not going to do well if the driver is not able to drive an absolutely perfect lap. But then you have races where it is also based on the driver's skill, where, like, they have to be able to pass and they have to be able to make moves and fight. But then we also have races where it's very dependent on strategy. And we see that often, actually. A lot of races are dependent on strategy, but not in the same way that Monaco is. I think when we've seen races dependent on strategy, it's like, okay, well, when are we going to pit? Like the tire strategy and stuff like that. Like, when are we going to call people in and whatnot? That's the strategy a lot of races depend on, where this one, it really just depends on, you'll understand when we talk about the actual race. But it was an interesting one. I think spectator-wise, they might have some issues in the future.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to introduce something to create interest. I think they see the grumblings, but then they also see the fact that it is a very historically important race.
I mean, visually, it is beautiful.
Yeah, I think visually, I think it's also money-wise, it probably brings in some of the biggest money all year for teams.
Some of the shots are also one of the coolest things ever. Like, they had a drone shot that
it was,
you could see like 4 different corners in the drone shot, and it was so cool.
yeah, it looked like a video game. I have my issues with it, but I also have an issue with, one, building new race courses. There's so many already on this planet that can be upgraded and improved in so many countries that show interest all the time. That I don't know. I don't see the point of like ending a race like Monaco or
Oh
Imola
no.
for something new, because I think you're gonna lose. Like, you've already lost some fans like love for things that they've changed. It's like,
No, I just imagine
and
that
they
they'll
won't
probably
take it
have to
off.
throw something in there to make it a bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Because it could get to the point where it's literally just, okay, you qualify in this and nothing changes.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're going to get into the most important part of the weekend, qualifying. Qualifying was interesting. I think this is the first qualifying session that we've had where people stay out basically the entire time.
I think you have to.
Oh yeah, you don't have an option in Monaco.
You don't have an option with Monaco. The laps are so much shorter than other racetracks, and the times changed insanely and at a speed I don't remember.
Yeah.
So,
basically, it was obvious that whoever was the last person to get in a lap was going to have the fastest lap.
yeah, and it just shows you how much the track changes.
Yeah, the track evolution was crazy. So for Q1, we actually see Williams first out on track. Williams was doing something quite interesting that I've never really seen them do before. They were doing their out lap, and then they would start doing what we all thought was going to be like actually setting a time, but their time would be like 13 seconds slower than everybody else. So I almost feel like it was like a medium lap.
Well, I wonder if they were trying to burn off some fuel, like make the car a little bit lighter, or if they were just trying to like do a medium lap to like break in the tires and get an idea of where everyone else was.
And let everyone else do a fast lap and lay down some rubber and then go.
Well, yeah, and then almost like guarantee that you do this medium lap. The people behind you are doing a fast lap. The people behind
being
you
the
are
first
gonna
ones
slow
out
down.
on being the first ones out on track, you're gonna have the most amount of time to really warm up your tires, and then you're gonna get the best track evolution for when you're actually doing your fast lap. So that was really interesting to see. At first, I thought it was just one of the Williams, and I realized it was both of them, and I was like, huh, both of them wouldn't have just bailed out on a lap. So this seems like a strategic call.
I do feel like this was the first sign of how similar they ran this weekend too.
Yeah, I feel like usually they do a little bit of something different, but they basically did the exact same thing.
Yeah, if it's nothing short of anything, it shows you how consistent of drivers Carlos and Alex both are, because they are next to each other in everything recently. It's
I love
insane.
I love it. It brings me so much joy. And my next note quite literally was track evolution is insane.
Wow.
Pierre was impeded at one point by Lance Stroll, and everybody was just like getting fed up with Lance today.
I feel like it typically happens with
Are
Lance.
you really going to be surprised that you're getting impeded in a qualifying lap in Monaco?
Yeah.
Where are cars supposed to go?
I that's the frustration is I don't think anyone has anywhere to go.
Yeah.
And they get stuck in these like shitty moments where there's so many cars they're focusing on not hitting the guy in front of them, worrying about the guy behind them, worrying about the guy to the left of them, and their freaking poor engineers can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
So
sometimes I wonder if Monaco quali should be a bit more like how IndyCar does their qualifying.
Ooh.
Where you can do it in like different groups too.
So
like,
it's less people on the.
And even like in F2 when they do qualifying for Monaco, I'm pretty sure they do it in groups.
Well, I wonder if they're gonna start to like seriously think about that, because I said this to you when we were watching. Can you imagine 22 cars next season trying to figure this shit out? Like, it was so busy already. It was like every single driver was yelling at each other on the radio.
They were all getting
for
so
how
angry
mad
with each
they
other.
were about impeding. So I'm curious to see how the FIA is going to tackle this problem.
Yeah. And then later on in the session, with about minute left. As
Yeah,
everybody
like,
was about to start doing their last lap,
yeah.
there's a red flag because Kimi Antonelli ended up crashing into that same corner that Isaac Hadjar had crashed into the day before. He basically did the exact same
Yeah.
thing. So it happens. The rookies seem to be quite hard on themselves for both of these crashes, I'd say. I think it's your rookie session at Monaco. You've never been on the Monaco track with this many cars before. It's okay.
Yeah, I think it does show you how tricky it is. Like, as much as people sit there and complain about how slow and how you can't pass, I do think that it does show you the skill that's needed to just stay on this track.
Yeah. I think the reason why they were both so upset, specifically Kimmy in particular, right now, is because qualifying is the most important part about Monaco. And so if you crash out in Q1, it doesn't really matter that you made it onto Q2.
Well, and I don't think we mentioned Ollie got that insane penalty.
Yeah, Ollie ended up getting a crazy penalty because of, I think, this red flag, maybe? Or it was another red flag? I can't remember.
It was a red flag, I thought, during practice that he sped up, or like he did something in the pit
I
lane
think
or
he
whatever.
passed Carlos in the
Past
pit lane.
Carlos.
He got a 10-place grid penalty plus 2 or 3 points on his super license, which is the most insane penalty ever. I understand safety is a very important thing, 100%. But you're telling me that Charles crashing into Lance Stroll is going to give Lance a 1-place grid penalty. Meanwhile, that you're giving a 10-place grid penalty?
Yeah, it definitely seems
You basically just
harsh.
said, screw your race. Who gives a shit?
And that's what a lot of people were saying online when the penalty got dropped was, what's the point of even doing like qualifying? So I think it just hurt too to see Ollie get out in the session, because ultimately, let me go through who got knocked out. So Gabby Bortoleto, Ollie Behrman, Pierre Gasly, Lance Stroll, and Franco Colapinto all got out. And so I think it just kind of like sucked further that Ollie wasn't able to be in the top 10 and have a possibility of not being dead last. I also think that there's a lot of already people are going at the throat of Colapinto, and a lot of people are questioning the improvement, if this is an improvement on Jack Doohan.
I think it's a really hard race to
Yeah,
judge someone's performance on when it's their, what is it? Is it second race?
second race, and I think a lot of people thought it was crazy taking Jack out when Alpine did, because the opportunities in Europe are so drastically different that to compare what Jack did versus what Frank, like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So,
Well, especially on some of the older European tracks, they don't really have a ton of runoff like you do in a lot of the Middle Eastern tracks, and or even like really just a lot of the other tracks. And so you're not going to have a lot more wiggle room for mess ups. And so, like, if Franco does mess up, it's going to cause a lot more crashes than potentially Jack had done.
yeah.
So, the whole situation was just weird. I don't particularly enjoy this drama. I just
Yeah.
let them drive. I don't know. Q2, we have Williams and Ferrari on mediums when they first started off. So they started off on mediums. But then, like 2 minutes into the session, George ended up losing power in the middle of the tunnel, actually, which is not the place you want to be stuck in, because even though it's a tunnel, and there's no like hills or anything, it's not a complete straight shot in the sense that like you can see from beginning to end. Like it is a curved tunnel.
Well, when they replayed him losing power, he didn't even lose power in the tunnel. He lost power
He started losing power way
further back, but it was a hill, so he just kept rolling. Yeah, it was not a good quality day for Mercedes.
No, this whole weekend was not a great Mercedes weekend, which is disappointing for them because they've had quite a successful season so far.
Yeah.
No, I think that they'll be fine after this. I think they'll probably regroup and whatever. But yeah, it was definitely not a weekend for them. But because of this, there was obviously a red flag. And about 30 marshals come running to George's safety, and he has to sit in the car and steer it, so that they can get it off track. And all the other cars go into the pit lane. And this is actually when Ferrari changes back onto softs. Williams stays on the mediums, I believe, at least for
I
this
think
first
so.
run
Yeah.
of Q2. And then everybody goes back out once everything's done, does their run of Q2. The Williams also switched back to softs as well. And Fernando was very excited to be done. This was when he had done a couple of fast laps, and they were pretty comfortable with where his spot was at the time. And his race engineer says onto the radio, like, "All right, Fernando, like, I think you're good to come in. Like, I think you're okay." And he was like, "Oh, thank goodness! I don't want to do anymore."
Yeah. Did we talk about Kimmy crashing in the first session?
Yeah, at the very end
Yeah.
of the first session. So yeah, Kimmy had crashed, but he did make it onto Q2 technically. But because of that, obviously he's not going to race, so he ended up obviously getting out in Q2. Do you have any other notes on Q2 other than who got out?
Carlos was not able to move on when he and Alex moved to the softs. He stated he had no grip, whereas Alex was able to move on. So I think it just kind of continues to show that while they are driving really like closely, there is a lot of differences in the comfortability in the way they drive the car. And you can see that Carlos is still definitely trying to get more comfortable.
I think the Williams were having, I think that not just the Williams, several other teams between last weekend and this weekend. So both last weekend and this weekend, we had the same tire compounds. The C6 tire, I think a lot of teams are really, really struggling with.
Yeah, it's
And
soft.
so I think it's like too soft to the point where it's almost like not grippy enough. And people are just really struggling. And I think Alex was able to get what he needed out of them for Q2, but then in Q3, I just don't think he was able to get the proper use out of them at all.
So, knocked out of Q2 was Carlos, Yuki, Nico, George, and Kimmy. And honestly, like I said earlier, the Mercedes was a big surprise. The fact that they were both so low on the grid. Yeah, a lot of people were shocked.
Yeah. So for Q3, nothing crazy really happened in Q3. Everybody just kind of went out, did their thing, and the very end was a bit surprising. So Charles at one point was what was on pole,
Yeah.
provisional pole.
So both McLarens and Charles were both putting in good times, and when it came to some of the final runs, Oscar put in the fastest time, then Lando put in the fastest time, and then Charles put in the fastest time. Both McLarens decided to put in another fast lap to see if they could bump out Charles.
Because the McLarens had set their fastest times, so they had gone out at like 4 minutes left to go, or like 3 minutes left to go, so they were able to set a fast time as everybody else was coming out on their out lap for their last lap. But because of that, they still were able to do a little bit of a slower lap and then go back again and do one more fast lap before the checker flag.
So Lando was able to secure pole position, but Oscar unfortunately wasn't able to move up and improve, so he was stuck in third. Like Emma said earlier in the podcast, Lando did secure pole position for the fastest ever pole lap at Monaco, and this is crazy, a minute and 9.954 seconds.
That's crazy.
So remember that the freaking lap record is 1 minute and 12.909 seconds. So like the difference is insane. So I have the top 10, or do you want to see the top 10?
I have the top 10.
Okay, go.
So we have P1 Lando, P2 Charles, P3 Oscar, P4 Lewis. So the Ferraris had a pretty successful qualifying session. P5 was Max, P6 Isaac, P7 Fernando, P8 Esteban, P9 Liam, and P10 Alex. I think that this weekend really showed the difference in comfort with the Red Bull between Max and Yuki. If you're not comfortable with your car, you're going to struggle at this track. And I think the Red Bull has proven to be a very uncomfortable car to drive. And so it's not surprising that Yuki was unable to be in the top 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isaac, I'm pretty sure, is the highest qualifying rookie since Lewis Hamilton
At Monaco.
at Monaco.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is very exciting.
Yeah, a lot of people, including himself, were pleasantly surprised at his performance. I think it also goes to show, again, that the V-Carb is a great car. Liam was also in the top 10,
Yeah.
which was, exciting to see, especially because we haven't had a 2 V-Carb in the top 10 in a while.
Yeah.
So.
And Fernando Alonso somehow was able to push it out and make it into the top 10 somehow in that car.
Ugh, that car.
That car. What an interesting one. Okay, we are going to get into the race now. Lando, off of the start, had taken the lead. He was obviously on pole, so he was already kind of in the lead. But Charles really scared you for a second if you're a Lando fan. But Lando actually locked up around turn 1, which made Charles go a little wider than I think he was hoping for. And it also did not allow Charles to basically cut Lando off around turn 1. So the lockup actually worked in Lando's favor.
Yeah, I'm curious what would have happened in an alternate universe if that lockup never happened.
That's
would
true.
Charles have won 2 years in a row?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think it was in the cards this year. And so something very interesting actually happened. So as we've said, it's really difficult to make a pass around Monaco unless you do something extraordinary or potentially put it into the wall.
Yeah.
And around, I don't remember what turn it was. I believe it was 2 turns before the tunnel. Gabby Bortoleto ends up passing on, I believe it was the outside of Kimi Antonelli. And then because of the way that the turns were, he was not really able to hold the outside because holding the outside meant going into the wall, and that's exactly what he did. Gotta commend the bravery, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, what a ballsy move. I feel like only a rookie would attempt that.
Only a rookie would attempt that. And I found it giving us some interesting moves in the first lap. Thank you.
And you know what? Way to go after something that I don't think a lot of people would have done.
No, absolutely not.
So, props to you.
Yeah. Sadly, it didn't end your race, actually.
No, it didn't.
No.
He honestly hit a barrier.
In the perfect way.
In the perfect way, in the perfect barrier, because not all barriers are made equal at Monaco. And he was able to just do a bit of damage to the front wing, which is obviously a slower pit stop, but a quick replacement for the team. So, could have been worse.
It really could have. So, because of that, we obviously had a yellow flag for a second, but it wasn't. I don't think it was. Was he dragging debris? No, it was somebody else who had debris. We'll get to that. In a couple laps.
Yeah.
So we end up having a VSC out, though, because of this, so that he can get in.
Yeah.
Because he was going much slower. And so because of that, we have Gabby go into the pits to fix everything. And then we see, with the 2 pit stop requirement, there was the expectation that people further back in the grid were probably after a lap 1 safety car, because there's almost always one, that there was going to be a couple of people that were going to go in after that first lap and get new tires just to get it over and done with, and then do it again a little bit later on in the race. And that's exactly what we saw from Yuki, Pierre Gasly, and Ollie Behrman, and I think maybe a few others. The VSC ends up going in at lap 4, and then lap 9 we see Pierre Gasly making, quite literally in my opinion, the dumbest move ever and crashing right into his old teammate Yuki.
Yuki called it out, the pundits called it out. It was just sloppy. I don't know if he got distracted. I don't know if I don't know, but he basically tried to squeeze his way in
a place where you can't do
that.
Where
you can't do that. And as Yuki said, is he an idiot? Then that's
because he crashed into Yuki, you then have it was a lot more damage than expected, to be honest.
Yeah.
But he was still had like all 4 tires on, I believe. No?
No,
What
I
was
thought he
it?
punctured one of his tires and he was the one that was
He
dragging
was
the
hobbling
debris.
back to the
Yeah,
pits.
he was
He had enough on his car to get back to the pit.
but he was dragging.
There was so much debris all over the track. I don't know how they did not get a fine for that.
Yeah, we were well, not that I'm worried, but we were concerned that that was what was going to happen, was that he was going to get some sort of penalty for continuing to drive it, or that they were going to get some major fine.
His front wing was also, again, so you have the spot where Isaac and Kimmy had both crashed throughout the weekend, and then you have a turn right after that, and you're driving along. I believe that is where the swimming pool is. And that's where his front wing was, and a bunch of other debris just on the center of the track. And there was a yellow flag for that section of the track, but then once you go, I don't know, 20 feet forward, then it was a green flag.
It wasn't like they did it for the whole track. They just did it for certain sections, which was confusing.
Everybody was saying, why do we not have a VSC at least? Why do we not have something? A yellow flag in one section of the race when we have literal debris laying all over the track right now is crazy.
I wonder if it was fear of, like, if there's too many VSCs, everyone's going to take advantage of the safety cars for their pits, and then our plan isn't going to work. Like, knowing the FIA, they don't want to look stupid.
Well, you look stupid, in my opinion. So Pierre is hobbling back to the pit. Again, so much debris, and there's a yellow flag. And we have Max right behind Oscar. Max was not following the delta whatsoever of what he was supposed to be doing because it was a green flag for a good chunk of the track, but then a yellow flag in that section. And he was practically trying to pass Oscar in the yellow flag. And even Oscar was like, it's a yellow flag. What is he doing?
Yeah, it was just a strange move, but I feel like we've seen it from Max before, where he toes the line of, like, what can I push? Can I scare the driver? Like, it seems like a macho man kind of intimidation factor move. I don't know. It's not my favorite, but I feel like it's very on brand for Max.
It's very on brand for him, but when you have a track that's already not up to FIA safety regulations and you've got half of a car laying in the middle of the track practically.
Well, and the problem too was that Oscar was visibly trying to slow down because there was so much. I think there was like a whole section of front wing, and Oscar was trying to drive around it because it is quite a curvy track, and
he's trying to slow down while also having to defend from Max.
Max just tries to go around him, but I don't know. I'm sure Max will deny it or sit there and be like, "Oh well, I was eventually gonna break." I'm sure it's all up to interpretation, but he's done stuff like this before though, where he
not a fan of it.
Yeah, because I feel like he did this a few times when they were doing like rolling starts or whatever, where you'd get up the person's
He gets
butt.
a little too close to passing them under
it's just like
a safety car.
He's a man of many talents, and I feel like he thinks that is.
I think he thinks he's being sneaky.
Yeah, but
you're not.
Like,
you're not being sneaky.
You're always.
In fact, you're almost breaking the rules.
Yeah.
Anyways. Obviously, Pierre retired because that's not being fixed. It's not like his front wing was an issue like Gabby's was. They did try, I think. But the suspension on his the front suspension was just...
Yeah, no.
I think I'm mixing up there was an IndyCar suspension.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about...
I'm like, we watched 8 hours of motorsport yesterday, and it's all blending in.
So lap 13, and then like around like lap 13 to 15, we see 13 to 15. Oh my gosh, we see a bunch of people starting to go in for tires. Hulkenberg, Franco, Hadjar, they're all going in. And now Lawson is leading a DRS train. This was the strategy that fucked Williams and basically everybody else. Mercedes. I'm so sorry to you guys. This was an unfortunate event for you.
So the funny thing is that when the FIA decided to introduce this 2-stop rule, a lot of people are saying that the FIA didn't take into consideration that when qualifying, there's a high probability that teammates will qualify right next to each other. Similar to Liam Lawson and his teammate, Isaac Hadjar, similar to
Carlos and
Carlos
Alex.
and Alex, similar to someone else did it, didn't they? Someone else attempted to. Anyways,
I feel like McLaren kind of did it a little bit.
long story short, one teammate became the sacrificial lamb. And in VCarb or Racing Bulls or whatever
you want
their
to call
name
it.
is, wanted to do was Liam Lawson took the time, because you physically really cannot pass at this racetrack. So Liam decided to slow down a little bit. His interpretation of it after the race is very funny, and he fully admitted that, like, listen, at the end of the day, it's just strategy. Like, no one wants to do it. Like, we all want to race, but, like, it is about points, especially in the middle gap, like the middle teams. So Liam basically slowed down long enough that Isaac, in that length of time, could do both of his pit stops without losing his spot and staying in the points.
And then they swapped positions.
And did the
then
same exact
Isaac
thing.
was the sacrificial lamb, and then Liam got to go in and do that.
So Williams sees this.
Williams is directly behind them.
And Williams is like, if they're doing it, we're going to do it. But
we have no option. This is the only thing that we can do.
It's the only thing we can do, and we're 9th and 10th. We need to stay in the points. So
Carlos starts holding up the rest of the pack while Alex goes in.
They successfully do Alex
and then they swap.
and Carlos, and they swap. And when Alex is doing it, George is behind him and is just getting frustrated. He sees the bullshit for what it is. He sees the strategy that they're pulling. He's like, this is dangerously slow. But the FIA doesn't have any rules. There's no rule book for this situation.
There are technically rules against going dangerously slow.
But they weren't doing that.
They were just going slightly slower than they really should be. So they weren't going all out, but they were not going too far away from actual race pace.
So there's a chicane that, I don't remember which one.
It's the main chicane right by the swimming pool.
Is it the Nouveau?
Is it the Louis Chevron?
Maybe. I don't know if that's the main one. Anyways, there's a chicane that it basically, there is no barrier, so you can cut this corner. And George just decided to completely cut it. And Alex was just frustrated because Alex was like, there's one thing of us doing strategy, but there's another thing of, like, blatantly cutting a corner, like, blatantly and going off track.
People had been doing this all weekend, cutting that corner, and it was pissing Fernando Alonso off. He was like, you can't just decide to not drive part of the race course.
But George flat out said on the radio, like, I don't care if I get the penalty. I'm not staying behind this for the next 60-something laps.
Well, in record time from the FIA making a decision somehow, we then see on the screen almost immediately that George is required to do a drive-through penalty, which basically means he just has to drive through the pit lane, which then means he'll drive through the pit lane and come out behind that whole group again. And get stuck.
The problem for me is that I understand George's frustration, but I also agree in the sense of, like, you are blatantly going off track and you're a leader. Like, you're a leader in the sport, and obviously he's not going to be perfect and he can't be perfect in every single moment, but it's like, don't start cutting corners. Like, because cutting corners can get dangerous really fast. And it's like...
And with him being the head of the GPDA, I think that it's going to be a really interesting meeting with the drivers, because you'll have the drivers who are like, Alex Albon was like, I know. Alex and Carlos were like, we know this sucked. We actually didn't want to be doing this, but we didn't really have an option. You had the VCarb drivers that were like, like, they were kind of giggly about it, to be honest. Like,
yeah.
I think that they're also both young drivers, and so they don't really understand it yet, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then you have George, who was like, we're not racing. Like, this isn't racing here then. And, like, I just want to race. And so, like, you don't technically have rules against what Williams and VCarb were doing. There are technically rules about what George had done. But, like, was George in the wrong for being like, I want to race?
Yeah. And I guess that's the big question.
Yeah.
Where's the line drawn?
Alex Albon ended up taking George out for dinner
Yeah.
afterwards as an apology. Apparently, James Vowles ended up apologizing to Toto and was like, this isn't what I want to be doing, but we have no choice here. And James Vowles did post his normal, like, team principal post-race video, and he was like, this is not how we want to go about racing, but at the end of the day, it's about points, and we needed these points.
Yeah.
So, yeah. There's a lot of other stuff that kind of happens throughout the race, but it's a lot of like pit stops just here and there. Someone who did, I feel like, make some time up throughout the race where it was Ollie, actually. I think if V-Carb and Williams hadn't like fucked around and done that bullshit, I think Ollie would have actually done really well in this race.
Yeah.
I think he would have moved up a ton. I think Ollie's also one of the rookies who I could have seen making a ballsy move at this track.
Yeah, I don't know how many, like, quote-unquote ballsy moves were even made in the whole race.
No, there wasn't really
anything.
anything.
There wasn't any, and I do think that, I don't know what the consensus online is with the two-stop, pit-stop plan. I think it did add a little bit of, like, intrigue, like, it added a little extra oomph. It made the teams work a little harder.
I think next year they're probably, if they want to keep the two-stop, they're just going to have to make a rule that you're not allowed to do what Williams and V-Carb did, because then we'll get movement.
Yeah, I mean, but the problem is too is that it just becomes a matter of the drivers don't want to make those moves. The drivers don't want to crash. Like there's no room.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how to improve it without making the car smaller.
Yeah, we actually had a friend over last night who, was it one of our friends who was like, what if they just race in old cars?
Someone said
like,
that.
Like make like specific Monaco cars that are smaller than what our normal cars are.
Or like we
today.
were saying, like go back and figure out what like the peak year of Monaco was, like where you had the best battles, you had the best wins, like the best like stories on the track. And figure out what car model that was and just be like, we'll do. But then it wouldn't become an F1. Like, I could see it becoming, like, the first non, like, points race on the calendar.
I could see that, too.
Like, where it still happens and they make it more historical. Like, you have to do it as, like, an exposition. I mean, dude, that would make so much sense for them to do that for, like, instead of the big livery O2 event, to do Monaco as, like, a big, like, F1 conference type thing.
I just think that it'd be really hard to do that because you have these drivers who have dreamed about winning Monaco as, like, a race forever, and then you tell them, oh, this isn't actually, like,
a race anymore.
This isn't, like, a race.
Yeah, and that's the problem is, like, the intrigue and again, the money. There's so much money. They would never downsize it. They have to figure out a different thing with the cars.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to see what else other interesting things happened where it's, like, actually worth talking about. There was one funny point where Max was saying that his shifts felt like they were from 1972. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
I'm going to assume that's a bad thing.
I wasn't sure if it was a good or bad thing because 1972 I feel like was a good year for F1.
I think you were just saying they were old.
Okay. Yeah. Saying old is a lot easier than 1972.
I don't know.
Anyways. By lap 38, we actually see Fernando's car smoking. Mm-hmm. What happened to that again? Oh, he retired. Did he retire?
I don't remember.
Let me take a look. I think he
did. Again, guys.
Yes, he did. He did. He DNF'd because his car was smoking.
What happened?
That's a great question.
Well,
I did not write anything else down except for the fact that Fernando's car was smoking.
Didn't
he ended up DNFing.
One of the pundits were like, and Fernando Alonso really is the unluckiest man in the world.
Yeah.
Because he said that the previous day. So, yeah, the guy's car is just, the Aston Martin's car just
deserves better.
Figure it out. Yeah.
We did have Oscar almost crash at one point from some sliding around that he was doing. There was a bunch of drivers that were doing this where, like, there was a quick slide of the rear of the car and it almost crashed into the side of the barriers, but they were okay in the end. The pit strategy of the top 4 was interesting. Max kind of stayed out for as long as possible for his second pit
Yeah.
stop. And then you had the McLarens kind of both pit kind of in the center-ish of the
Yeah.
race. Like, their strategies kind of made sense.
The Mercedes pit strategy made no sense.
Rumor has it they forgot that you had to do the second pit stop until, like, lap 60.
That's what I heard, but I don't know if that's like internet. If the internet
It could just be like a
making
meme.
fun of them, yeah. So,
But if that is true, that would make a lot of sense as to what happened.
Yeah, because they just did not go.
They could have pitted when they were stuck behind everybody.
Yeah,
like that's what other cars in the back were doing. They were still pitting.
Ugh, Mercedes, it just was not your weekend.
No, it was not. What else? So, like we said, how George had passed Alex, Kimmy actually did the same thing on the next lap, but he was told to give the spot back immediately to Alex, because they already saw what George was having to deal with, and they didn't want to have to deal with that for another one of their drivers. Jolyon was actually very angry about what George had done. Jolyon Palmer was like, he's making a laughing stock of the rules. Like, this was not okay. Like, this is just, you're just in a shit position, unfortunately. It happens.
Yeah, I think it also is kind of like, George, you're in the back of the group right now. Like, welcome to not being in the front.
Yeah. Yeah. The lap in the late 50s of the laps, that's when we see, like, the last kind of the pit stops. And the reason why Max was waiting so long is because they were hoping for, like, an end-of-race safety car, which has happened before.
Yeah, that's what...
They were really praying for that to happen.
So then, yeah, on the, like, second to last lap, he ends up going in.
Yeah. For the good last chunk, we have Charles just up Lando's ass. And Lando is having to race a precise race, because if you don't, you'll crash. Have Charles trying to defend from Charles. Also being in the dirty air of Max. And then he's asking, where the hell is Oscar? I need him to put some pressure on Charles. I don't think that Charles realized that Oscar was so close to him at all.
As soon as Max goes into the pit, Lando pulls away.
Yeah, it was, like, insane.
Yeah, so it just showed you that the car was just stuck in dirty air.
And we all know the McLaren doesn't do well in dirty air.
Yeah, so...
And then that was kind of the end of the race. I feel like those were the main things that really happened.
Yeah, again, they tried. It was more exciting than I think it
has been.
It has been, but again, it just, you get stuck, and it is frustrating. But there's really no place for them to go.
Yeah,
you know. So again, the 2 pit stops wasn't a bad idea, but it didn't work out, I think, in the way they really thought it was going to.
So the final order, and then we'll get into our final thoughts, were P1 Lando, P2 Charles, P3 Oscar, P4 Max, P5 Lewis, P6 Isaac, P7 Esteban, P8 Liam, P9 Alex, P10 Carlos, P11 George, P12 Ollie, P13 Franco, P14 Gabby, P15 Lance, P16 Nico, P17 Yuki, P18 Kimmy, and then Fernando and Pierre both DNF'd. So, all right, let's get into our final thoughts now. Obviously, Monaco was Monaco. I think we've droned on enough about how there's not a lot that happens at Monaco. So there's not really any final thoughts, except for I'm glad that Ferrari had a little bit of a better weekend. I do think that people need to stop acting like Charles quite literally is the actual prince of Monaco.
Yeah.
Because they feel like sometimes people do treat him like he is the actual prince of Monaco. Royalty is a weird thing, people, as we have all agreed on in history. They treat him like he's a god.
I mean, but that's any fans. They all do.
I guess. What else happened? I feel like there's something else.
IndyCar?
No, other than IndyCar. I feel like there's something else Monaco related.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah, I actually can't think of anything.
Yeah, it was just...
Other than, like, stupid drama.
Yeah, it was just a good old weekend. We have Spain next, which is exciting.
España.
Yeah, I think it'll be more interesting. I unfortunately, and I feel like I said this last year, I don't remember Spain. Like, I don't really, it's one that I tend to forget.
I just remember I don't think Carlos and Fernando did well, and I was upset.
I don't think so, yeah.
Speaking of Spain, we have our first ever Spaniard winner of the Indy 500, Alex Palou.
Yeah.
As Spaniards, we are very excited about this, but he is from Barcelona, so.
Barcelona.
Yes, we are going to his home. Not we. F1 going to his home next weekend.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You looked at me like, when are we going to Barcelona?
No, my question was like, you haven't told us you're going to Spain again.
I'm not going to Barcelona.
But yeah, it was awesome watching the Indy 500.
I thought it was so going from like the lack of energy of Monaco and then going to the Indy 500 where like a car was on fire.
Not that's funny.
Yeah,
that's very serious.
Yes.
But I think it was just like we went from this like manicured, very posh, very like ritzy, glamorous, like very European to this like down and dirty American racing. And it was just, it's so entertaining. And again, watching it does make you realize why the guys you were sitting with at the Speedway were so much like, we don't get why people love F1 so much. Like, IndyCar is so exciting because that's what it is. It's really
so exciting.
I will say there are a few interviews with Pato O'Ward where he's flat out been like, yeah, IndyCar is significantly more dangerous than F1, and I fully agree. It is.
I 100% agree.
They are still refueling these cars, which is why I don't believe that's why there was a fire. There was a fire on Alexander Rossi's car because of a gearbox issue. But so there's like aspects that they don't do in F1 anymore that they still do. There's safety aspects of IndyCar that are just not as up to date as F1. And just watching IndyCar, knowing the amount of time, I mean, it's the entire month of May that these teams are working at the Speedway in Indianapolis. You realize how intense this race is at the end when these guys can barely get out of their cars.
Oh, 100%.
It's just insane.
It looks exhausting.
And it's so long. Like, F1 is so short compared to the Indy 500.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a 3 to 4 hour race when you're watching it. It takes a very long time.
And so much is happening.
And you're full out the whole time on an oval.
Yeah.
You don't get a breather whatsoever. And the chaos of the pit lane, you think that there's chaos in an F1 pit lane? Watch an IndyCar race.
Yeah.
When they're all trying to exit the pit lane and there's like 15 cars trying to get out, it's insane.
Yeah. It's such a different beast of a sport in really great ways, but yeah, we thoroughly enjoyed it. Like,
so there was a crash on the very last lap. IndyCar, Fox, whatever we were watching it on, did not say who it was who crashed. All they were focusing on was Alex Palou. Understandably. But also, somebody crashed. Let us know who that is. Let us know if they're okay. It was Nolan Siegel.
Really?
Yeah, he's okay. But yeah, he crashed on the very last lap.
Damn.
Which has to suck. It's like George in Singapore 2 years ago. Like, you've just raced such a hard race and then you crashed the very last lap. It has to suck.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of emotions in these drivers that weren't able to get to the finish line, but it also makes me realize, like, so many DNFs happened. It's understandable why when we do the history of some of these drivers, like, some of them have entered the Indy 500 a few times and haven't finished because car issues or crashes or whatever. Like, it makes you realize that, like, not everyone gets to finish the race.
I mean, Marco Andretti crashed on the first lap?
Scott
McLaughlin's car crashed on the first lap.
That was terrible.
And it was a shit show, truly.
Yeah. But we're hooked. Like we've said in the past, it's been a really fun sport to get into this season. We haven't talked about it as much as we wanted to. But yeah,
there was a lot of drama around qualifying also because apparently the Penske's were cheating. Except for Scotty Mac.
Apparently they're like kind of known for it.
Yeah, this was news to us.
Yeah.
So they were bumped to the back of the track.
But
Joseph Newgarden still walked his way up.
Moved up, yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy to watch. What else? Apparently, so the very last part of the race, you had some of like the back markers of the race kind of right in front of the first few for the podium winners, basically, holding them back a bit. And so apparently Pato in some post race interviews was like really pissed off about this because he was like, this is not the race that people want to see. Like, people want to see, like, last year, you racing to the very end. But like, once Alex Palou passed Marcus Ericsson, like, it was kind of just a straight line to the end for like the
Yeah.
last few laps. Like, you were kind of unable to pass because of the way that the the back markers were blocking a bit. So that was a little interesting to see that one of the things I find really interesting about IndyCar is the drivers have no filter.
Yeah, there's no PR. It's crazy.
Like, all of the F1 drivers, the difference between Kimi at the beginning of the season to now, you can tell that he was put into some media training classes,
yeah.
which is disappointing. I enjoyed the candor from him, where, that was a great word, where IndyCar, they will just say whatever they want.
Yeah, IndyCar is, I feel like, what, like the Schumacher days of
Yeah.
like the 90s into the 2000s, like it's still in that kind of energy where it's just like a little chaotic. Everyone's up in each other's business. There's like a bit of politics, there's drama.
So Alex Palou won, Marcus Ericsson came in second, and then David Malukas came in third. I was very happy for David
Really
Malukas.
happy for David Malukas.
Last year at the Indy 500, he had a broken wrist. He was basically running the IndyCar TikTok account, and then now he's on the podium. So very, very happy for him and his success. Pato ended up coming in fourth. And overall, I thought it was a really good, fun race to watch. Alex Palou did drink the milk at the very end. He gave some milk to his wife and his daughter.
So much milk.
So much milk. Apparently, according to Alex Palou, it was the best milk he's ever tasted, which is crazy, but love that for you. And then later on, 3 hours later, we turn on the Indiana Pacers
and
versus
he's at
New York
the
Knicks
game.
game, and he's at the game with the wreath around him, wearing a Pacers jersey, and it was like our worlds are colliding right now.
Yeah, but
so. And there was also somebody in like a Penske race suit.
Yeah, it was confusing.
Yeah. But overall, fantastic race. Really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
IndyCar, if there's any teams out there that want to invite us to hang out with y'all when we go to the Nashville race, we've already got tickets and we plan on getting paddy passes. But if any of y'all want us to hang out with you, let us know. We'd love to join. Anything else you want to comment on?
No, it's just been a good old
Sports
MC and
weekend.
Emma's Wild World of Sports.
Yeah, that's what MC called it on her whiteboard.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, I think that's it. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow, do all the things. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.